Hi, Quinn.
I'm really excited to be having this conversation with you because we're obviously doing this conference, and the conference is very much about AI and very much about what the world is going to look like and how we all feel about that world. But it's also about how do we amplify, magnify, um, understand the humanity component. Like, what is the role of humanity in this next 40, 50 years, and how can we amplify its magic? How can we pump it up and utilize it and just enjoy it in a way? So I'm curious about your hopes and your dreams for AI. What are your hopes and dreams for the AI era that we're entering into?
A great question. Thanks so much for asking. So, I would say that my future outlook for AI, my hopes and dreams for the future, is that we're able to keep a balance between AI and our humanitarian gestures. So, I want us to be able to remember that AI is
Mm,
a tool that we use. My concern that I'm seeing happening in the world now is that AI is eclipsing our relational dynamics between us as human beings.
mm.
But there's a way that we can keep this in balance. I recently watched a video with Ian McKilchrist at the AI technology conference that just most recently passed. And his plea to everyone was that we use AI to clean up the mess that it has made.
Mm,
Right? The
mm.
mess that technology has gotten us into, um, pollutions of our ecosystems, and the challenges of separation and being so divided from one another. But we can use AI to heal those wounds and bridge those gaps and rise to those challenges, but only if we continue to see it as a tool that we as humanity that we're using. If we forget that it's a tool, then it eclipses our our very nature as human beings. And well, uh, I think that we've all witnessed it to some degree, that there's times when people act more like machines than like human beings.
Mhm.
There's a perspective that we can slip into of having a very mechanized schedule of our day, of being very cold in our relations, very calculating in how we relate to one another.
Mhm.
And I think that's the big concern, is that AI will amplify those behaviors. But in the end, it's still a choice that we have to make of how are we going to behave with one another? What's the future that we want to create?
Mhm.
Is it is AI making the world a better place to live in, or is it just making it a cold, dreary place to live in?
And what is our role in making that choice?
Well, our focus is on education, right? So I tend to think that it all comes down to how we educate ourselves. And there's a lot of other possibilities in the world, but my focus is on education. So in the education field, if we, put AI in all the classrooms, then we're going to amplify this mechanized relations with one another. But if we keep our humanity primary, then that means in the classroom or in any learning center or any kind of educational setting, that means that we're focusing first on how we are in relations with each other. What's our human dynamics first? And then how are we using the technology that's available to us to amplify the good, the beautiful, and the 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 wonders that are available to us through learning and through education. And we're using digital technology and AI, we're using that to amplify what's available to us rather than making the digital technology primary. It's a supportive tool.
Well, and you keep mentioning the relational aspect of humans, like that being almost like one of the cornerstones of being a human. And I'm curious about the relational aspect to AI. So you're talking about the tool lens, if you will. What are some others? What are other ways that humans can view AI and be in relationship with AI?
Mhm. Well, one example would be something that I have experience with, which is distance learning. So, um, I myself went through individualized learning programs, and my kids are in homeschooling programs, which doesn't mean that we're isolated. It just means that we don't show up to a brick and mortar school, public school. What means is that we put our learning, we kind of make a patchwork quilt of all these wonderful learning opportunities. So that doesn't mean that, everything's organic and hands-on. We do use a lot of digital technology tools, but it's there to assist in the distance learning. So, we use our computers to connect with teachers who are not in our local area, who can bring us information and experiences that we couldn't access otherwise. So that's just one example. We are a part of a charter school which supports homeschooling families, and that's part of their mission and outreach is to support distance learning. But they keep relations primary. So it's about what does the student need for the learning journey that they are on, and how can that be supported? How can their growth as a human being be supported? So that means finding them the teachers that they need, providing them with the digital technology that they need in order to connect with those people, in order to connect with those materials. So then digital technology becomes this tool rather than the primary focus of, let's get you a computer and let's get you signed up in all of these programs because reaching these learning goals is primary. Well, no, those aren't primary. What's primary is that our growth as human beings comes from this relational dynamic that we have with each other.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I heard you in sharing that almost share the lens without fully naming it of AI being an assistant, kind of like it's assisting you in what you're doing, which is not dissimilar to it being a tool. But I think if I think of AI as my assistant or something that's just assisting me versus a tool I'm using to do something, I might use it differently. And I wonder, I don't know, I just wonder when we step into the next decade
Mhm.
of educating young people, what will the average teenager look at it as? Like what are their lenses, and how do we, I don't know, either help shape their like, I don't, I don't want to say like we should shape their lens and we should be choosing how they see it, but how can we help them foster a lens that is what they actually need to use it in the best way possible for them?
Well, there's a really interesting aspect of the human psyche that has to be taken into account here if we're going to keep our perspective on the difference between humanity and AI. So I call this paying attention to the thresholds. So we might say this like, when it's the sea you're swimming in, you don't necessarily recognize, right, the environment that you're surrounded in. So for the youth now, who are going to be our future citizens, adults who are making powerful choices in the future, if they've never been outside of the environment that is saturated with digital technology and AI, then they're not going to know the difference between an AI relationship and something that's different to that.
Mhm.
Now, I don't want to talk about, I right now, I'm not talking about a binary contrast of good, bad, right, wrong. I'm just talking about contrast. The
Mhm.
human consciousness needs contrast in order to see the beauty, right? Like this painting behind me, you can see the red more because of the green. Right? That's the way our entire consciousness works. We see the beauty because of the contrast. So in AI, again, Ian McGilchrist has done an amazing amount of research to tell us that this all uses just one part of the brain. And so what this means is that in the digital technology world, when we're using digital technology for education, it's actually an incredibly narrow perspective, and it's not bringing contrast to our ways of thinking. Therefore, we're not seeing the world in a multifaceted way, and we're missing out on the beauty of what is available to us in the wider reality. So part of how we as human beings evolving over millions of years, the way that that has been cultivated is through rites of passage. A rite of passage is when you take the time to very consciously observe the threshold between one state and another state. So between youth and adolescence and becoming an adult, right? But there's many other rites of passage that we all go through. And these thresholds are incredibly important for giving us contrast in our consciousness, for allowing us to be able to see multifaceted perspective of the world. So if education is so permeated by AI, then the students are going to have an incredibly narrow perspective on reality. And the mechanistic worldview is pretty narrow to begin with, but the digital technology and AI is narrowing it even more. A pretty simple answer to this is nature connection. Just take a walk out in nature. Nature is incredibly multifaceted and filled with high contrasts. How do we work that into education? That's a big question for everybody to be asking. And it's really has to be a personal choice, and it has to fit into your local ecosystem. But we got to remember that we are an expression of nature. We're not separate from nature. That's the mechanistic worldview again. And that's the worldview that promotes AI, that we're separate from nature and we're mechanistically capturing it, conquering it, and controlling it. But when we remember and recognize that we are an expression of nature, and that being in the natural world and learning in a natural way, that it is naturally bringing us a multifaceted experience, a multifaceted perspective on the world. That then gives us the perspective that AI is a tool. It's just one facet of our reality. It's not our all-encompassing reality. So my approach has been to have a really diverse learning experience. Make sure we don't get stuck in one track, and keep reaching out to many possibilities. Don't be afraid of failure. Check out lots of different possible pathways. Explore the world around you. And then if you have some digital technology and AI to assist you with that, that can make your experience all the better. But if the AI is the primary experience of the youth, of the teens, then their worldview is going to get more and more and more narrow.
So if you were to answer in a like, off the cuff, really quick soundbite type of way, how do we amplify the magic of humanity in an AI era? Like, what is one thing that we as humans, forget AI, but we as humans can do to amplify what makes us magical and awesome and spectacular, right? Like, how do we bring that? And like, I keep thinking about the relational piece you said and
Yeah.
the explore piece, but what is just like the one thing? What is like this one piece?
Foundationally, we are beings that have a unique awareness.
Mm, mm.
So education is meant to be about cultivating our awareness. It's not meant to be about training your brain for patterns that fit into the corporate world. That's not what education is meant to be. It's meant to be about cultivating our awareness. That's what makes us human beings. That's what makes us different. And the natural world is filled with awareness, but our awareness is unique. And it's unique in a way that it can be cultivated in many different directions, in many different outcomes that are all rich and beautiful. So when we hold the aim of cultivating our awareness, then we have the opportunity within reach of creating beautiful relationships between each other as individual human beings, these beautiful relational dynamics in groups and teams, and then also cultivating our communities to be more resilient, more dynamic, evolving with our evolving circumstances. And then even farther beyond that, of cultivating our awareness to be in connection with the more than human world. But it all comes down to first understanding that we are beings of awareness,
Mm.
and that we have the capacity to cultivate that through our relational dynamics.
And through education.
Yeah, I mean, that's what education's meant to be, is the flowering, to bring humanity into flowering and then to share those fruits with one another. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time and your awareness. It's beautiful to listen to, and I think it's really powerful, and I can't wait to hear what you have to say at the conference.
Thanks so much. Great to see you.
You too.